This was actually one of the most requested videos on my channel. You guys have been constantly asking me to cover The Boxer. Anytime I ask about what comics to cover, it's always The Boxer. And I did read part of it a few months ago, but now that I'm back into it, I can see why you guys have been insisting that I continue to read this, because this comic is good. Of course, saying good is an understatement. Like, The Boxer is able to cover a lot of content in its story that I sort of forgot about when I first read it a few months ago. When I first had read it, there were only like 10-15 chapters available, but now there are a lot of chapters available, which means a lot of catching up for me to do. But the more I read it, the more I'm falling in love, because The Boxer isn't just a story about boxing. You don't have to be a fan of boxing to love The Boxer. This is about character, it's about motivation, it's about where you're coming from when you're entering this boxing scene and how that impacts the people around you, and it's about how every character in this story handles their wins and their losses. This story has a sort of overpowered protagonist. This protagonist has a way of boxing that pretty much makes him unbeatable, as far as I can tell. And I know some people aren't the biggest fan of like, oh, okay, the protagonist, is unbeatable or overpowered, but this story doesn't focus on that. It doesn't focus on the fact that the main character is unbeatable. Like, that's almost something that isn't very important. It's more about why this MC is even interested in boxing and what are his motivations. Does he even have a personality? Like, that's way more interesting than the fact that he's like unbeatable in boxing. And the more he boxes, the more you find out about him, like what's going on in his head, and what about his coach? Is his coach bringing out the good in him or the bad in him? Like, how's that gonna play out? And his opponents, they end up learning a lot from their fights with him, for better or worse. And it's so interesting. It's honestly a very different way of handling an action comic. Normally, action comics are like, okay, the action is sick and dope, and that's why you want to read it, Okay, the characters are cool, but whatever. I feel like The Boxer, the characters come first. I almost don't even care about the action. I just want to find out what's going on with these people. And even though there is a main MC, there are multiple protagonists, at least as far as I can tell, or they're hinting at that. There's people from the very beginning of the story that were hinted at being more important, and you think, okay, hopefully we can see them again, and then you do, these characters actually stick around and matter and are very essential to the story, to the point where I think they're going to be main characters. And I really respect that about the story, the way they're able to surprise me with how much I care about these people. It's like, okay, I've seen this before. The kid gets bullied and then, okay, this guy comes in to save him. It surpasses my expectations, because that's not what happens. Like, the kid has to stick up for himself and the MC has to learn from that. He doesn't step in right away, or various things that happen. And because of that, I'm able to surprisingly care about these characters and I want to see them come back. It's really cool. So I gotta respect that. Well-written characters, but despite that, the action itself is also very good. It draws on a lot of real-life boxing tips and rules and things, but obviously is able to do it over the top to the point where it's fun. Obviously the characters are zipping back and forth and the punches are like lightning fast, and it makes it very entertaining to read and watch. And the art style from the very beginning is able to complement this beautifully. And as always, it gets better as the story goes on, despite being very well drawn at the very beginning. And I'm still sort of in the middle, so I'm very curious to see how the art continues to evolve. And I want to point out that it is very unique. I've never seen another story like this. I know I say that for a lot of comics, but it's true. The ones that I've been reading lately, I've been impressed. They aren't drawing from somebody else. There's not this consistent art style. I love that about the comics on Webtoon. One of the things that I'm most interested to find out about in the comic of The Boxer is the coach, because Coach K is this character who, at first I was like, yeah, Coach K, bring this guy into the boxing scene. But Coach K is a little freaky, and I'm not gonna spoil anything, but this guy is so obsessed with what he does that I almost wonder, will the main character, you, stick with him? What's gonna happen there? And if he does stick with him, will it be for better or worse? Because K is drawing a lot of good out of you, because you before was basically a husk of a person, and now I think he's starting to develop a personality, which is great. But at the same time, K is so obsessed with boxing, he pretty much only looks at you as a tool to achieve what he wants in the boxing scene, and that to me is a little scary. So I want to see that explored more, and I hope it does get explored. And of course, my boy Jay. I absolutely love Jay. I want to see more of him, and I think he is going to be a main character. So I really want to see how he can stack up to the rest of the boxing scene. I love the underdog characters, the sort of side characters who become more important, you know, and he's always been my favorite. So those are the main things that I want to find out about, and that's just a taste of what the Boxer has to offer. So if you liked what you heard and you want to read more about this story, you want to get into it yourself, check out the link down below. Huge thank you to Webtoon for actually sponsoring this video, giving me an excuse to talk about the Boxer as always. I love this story, but there's other stories on Webtoon as well. If you want to check those out, you can sort by genre, you can read only action, you can read only fantasy, or you can go into something more like mystery, or you read whatever you want. There's like hundreds and hundreds of stories there, comics that are coming out every single day. So if you want to check that out, the link is down below. I recommend the Boxer today, but again, there are so many good comics on Webtoon, and I'm definitely going to be continuing these stories in my free time. So hopefully you do too. And with that, I'll see you guys in my next Webtoon review. Take care.